Part 1. Debt, the silent assassin of empires. Debt has long been one of the most powerful yet underappreciated forces driving the downfall of history's greatest empires. Although military defeats, political upheavals, and external invasions often take center stage in historical accounts of fallen great powers, it is excessive debt, the silent empire killer, that has steadily and relentlessly undermined their foundations over the centuries. From ancient Rome to the Soviet Union, the overextension of resources, mismanagement of finances, and failure to manage mounting debts have triggered economic collapse, social upheaval, and ultimately the downfall of these once dominant empires. Examining the role debt has played in the collapse of past empires offers valuable insights into how it could contribute to the potential decline of the United States. Below is a summary of key historical examples. Part 2. The Roman Empire. The Roman Empire stands as one of the most iconic examples of how debt can contribute to the downfall of a great power. At its peak, Rome was the dominant force of the ancient world, ruling over vast territories that spanned Europe, North Africa, and parts of the Middle East. Sustaining such a vast empire demanded enormous financial resources. The Roman government had to fund its massive military, construct extensive infrastructure like roads and aqueducts, and uphold the splendor of its capital city. To manage the mounting debt, Roman emperors resorted to debasing the currency, reducing the silver content in coins to stretch their financial means. This approach, however, triggered rampant inflation and economic instability. The more the Roman government debased its currency to manage debt, the more severe the problem grew. As rising debt and spiraling inflation choked the economy, the empire found itself unable to adequately pay its soldiers, eroding military morale and effectiveness. Weakened by internal financial turmoil, Rome became increasingly susceptible to external threats. The cumulative impact of financial mismanagement, social unrest, and military decline ultimately brought about the empire's collapse. Part 3. The Spanish Empire. The Spanish Empire stood as a global superpower. The discovery of the New World brought a flood of gold and silver, filling the Spanish treasury with wealth beyond measure. However, this sudden abundance led to complacency and unchecked extravagance. The Spanish monarchy became entangled in expensive wars across Europe, including the 80 Years' War with the Dutch and conflicts with France and England, while simultaneously indulging in extravagant spending without concern for long-term financial stability. To fund these ambitions, Spain relied heavily on borrowing from European bankers, accumulating massive debts in the process. Initially, the influx of wealth from its colonies enabled Spain to manage its debts. However, as wars dragged on, the costs began to surpass the income from the New World. As Spain's debts continued to grow, its creditworthiness declined, and the economic downturn became irreversible. This eventually led to a series of bankruptcies in Part 4. The French Monarchy. The French monarchy in the late 18th century offers another compelling example of how debt can destabilize a powerful nation. France's participation in costly wars, such as the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution, placed immense strain on its finances. At the same time, the lavish lifestyle of the French court, embodied by King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, further depleted the treasury. France was burdened with crippling debt, and the government struggled to meet its loan obligations. By the late 1780s, the French government was spending more on interest payments than on its military. To cover the cost of its debts, the monarchy imposed heavy taxes on commoners, while the nobility and clergy were largely exempt. This inequality sparked widespread anger, fueling social unrest. By 1789, the situation had reached a breaking point, triggering the outbreak of the French Revolution. Part 5. The Qing Dynasty. The Qing Dynasty. The Qing Dynasty was the final imperial dynasty of China and a dominant economic power in the world. However, excessive spending and foreign borrowing in the 19th century played a pivotal role in its decline. The dynasty faced immense financial pressure from prolonged conflicts, including the Opium Wars, the Taiping Rebellion, and the Boxer Rebellion. These wars forced the Qing dynasty to borrow extensively from foreign lenders, further straining its finances. To manage its mounting debt, the Qing government raised taxes on peasants and small landholders. However, the heavy tax burden, combined with widespread corruption and inefficiency within the imperial bureaucracy, led to growing social discontent and eroded the central authorities' control over the provinces. Debt became a key factor that intensified the already fragile political and social conditions in the late Qing dynasty. Part 6. The British Empire. The British Empire, at the height of its power, the British Empire was so vast that the sun never set on it. However, the two world wars stretched the empire's resources to their breaking point. The enormous costs of fighting in both WW I and WW left Britain deeply in debt, especially to the United States. The financial burden of this debt made it impossible to maintain control over its sprawling empire, and Britain's status as a global superpower steadily declined. As a result, the pound lost its position as the world's leading reserve currency. Part 7. How Debt Destroys Empires. A Familiar Pattern. How Debt Destroys Empires. A familiar pattern. The pattern of empire collapse due to debt, seen in the cases discussed and countless others not covered, typically follows these stages. Stage number 1. Empires achieve success and become overconfident in their power. Stage number 2. Overconfidence leads to excessive spending on luxuries and military conflicts. Stage number 3. To finance this lavish spending, empires begin to take on significant debt. Stage number 4. The debt grows to unsustainable levels, creating a crushing financial burden. Stage number 5. Empires attempt to manage their debt through increased taxation and currency debasement. Stage number 6. The burden of debt falls on the populace as taxes rise, and the currency is debased to the breaking point, leading to widespread internal instability. Stage number 7. Unable to properly finance their militaries due to the debt, empires reach a critical tipping point. Stage number 8. Underfunded militaries combined with internal unrest leave empires vulnerable to foreign invasion, civil war, revolution, and other existential threats. Stage number 9. The empire collapses. Part 8. The United States of America. The USA's federal government currently holds the largest debt in world history, and it continues to grow at an alarming, uncontrollable rate. While the US may be able to maintain the illusion of solvency longer than any other nation, even the most powerful empires in history couldn't sustain this indefinitely, especially when the cost of servicing debt starts to become unmanageable. The situation has now reached a critical tipping point. This year, the annual interest on the federal debt surpassed the defense budget for the first time. It's projected to soon exceed Social Security, becoming the largest expenditure in the federal budget. As a result, the U.S. empire appears to be somewhere between stage number 6 and number in the pattern of empire collapse I outlined earlier. Part 9. The Summary. Debt has long been a silent but powerful force behind the collapse of empires throughout history. While military defeats and political upheavals are often cited as the causes of an empire's fall, it is excessive debt, mismanaged resources, overextension, and unmanageable financial burdens that ultimately weakens and brings down great powers. Historical examples like the Roman Empire, the Spanish Empire, the French monarchy, the Qing dynasty, and the British Empire all illustrate this pattern. For instance, Rome's reliance on currency debasement to manage debt led to inflation, social unrest, and military decline. Similarly, Spain's excessive borrowing to fund costly wars, despite an influx of wealth from its colonies, led to repeated bankruptcies and a loss of global influence. The French monarchy's lavish spending and failure to manage war debts triggered the French Revolution. The Qing dynasty's borrowing to finance prolonged conflicts led to internal strife, while the British Empire's debt from the World Wars contributed to its decline as a superpower. The collapse of these empires follows a common pattern. Empires become overconfident, engage in excessive spending, accumulate unsustainable debt, and attempt to finance it through taxation and currency debasement. This leads to economic instability, social unrest, and military weakness, making the empire vulnerable to external threats, internal revolt, or collapse. The United States, with its growing debt, appears to be following this pattern. Its federal debt is the largest in history, and interest payments have already surpassed the defense budget, with projections that debt service will soon exceed even Social Security. As a result, the U.S. seems to be entering a critical stage in the empire collapse cycle, potentially heading toward financial crisis. We hoped you liked this video on how debt kills empires. Please hit the thumbs up and share the video widely to help this channel grow.